Welcome to Financial Footsteps, candid conversations with financial leaders, the podcast that takes you deep into the minds of the masters behind the numbers. Join host Chad Dean as he connects with financial leaders as they share their journeys so that we can gain valuable insight from their failures and triumphs. Get ready for candid conversations, behind-the-scenes anecdotes, and practical wisdom that will transform the way you think about your career in finance. Put down the balance sheet and listen in.
Welcome to Financial Footsteps, where we explore the background and careers of financial leaders for the benefit of those who want to follow in their footsteps. My name is Chad Dean, your host. I've been a recruiter for 27 years, and I'm the owner and CEO of Integrated Management Resources, a Phoenix-based executive recruiting firm established 33 years ago. Integrated is a sponsor of this podcast today. And I'm very excited about our guest today, Maureen Musselman. Maureen has had a very long career in accounting and finance and is full of wisdom that I know will be incredible benefit to our listeners. Welcome, Maureen.
Thank you. Thank you for having me today.
Maureen Musselman, such a strong sounding name. I love that, Musselman.
It took me a while to take my husband's name.
Well, I like it a lot. I approve. So tell us, let's start with a little bit about yourself and where you're from and that kind of stuff.
Certainly. So I actually was born and raised here in Phoenix, Arizona. I grew up here, spent most of my career here. I did spend about 10 years back east in New York working. I've been married to my husband for 37 years. We just celebrated our 37th anniversary. I have two grown daughters. Unfortunately, both my girls still live back east with my grandchildren. And happy to be back in Arizona where the majority of my family is. So,
gotcha. Native.
Yeah, native.
Okay, so I'm a native too.
Uh-huh.
And every time I tell somebody that I'm a native, they go, "Oh, wow, I've never really met a native before." Isn't that funny?
It is funny because there's quite a few of us.
Well, we all grew up with a bunch of natives.
Exactly.
Right? Well, that's funny though. I'm, in grade school, I do remember kids just coming in and they would move in from out of state, fourth grade, fifth grade, sixth grade. And we adopted them.
Yeah.
We didn't care if they weren't from around here. So your daughters, are they in the business as well?
No. As a matter of fact, I will tell you, my oldest did her first internship with me when she was a freshman or sophomore in college and decided at that point in time that she was changing her major. She was not going into accounting. She said if she had to do this every day, she would hate coming into work. But I will tell you, she is an attorney. And so I don't know that it's that far off and different from what we do, but no. And then my other daughter is a registered dietitian. So totally different field. None of them I could convince to go into finance.
Gotcha.
As much as I tried.
Well, I don't know. I haven't tried to steer my kids towards recruiting yet. So I don't know. Maybe they'll fall into it. Who knows? So where back east did you live?
We lived in New Jersey. I worked in the city.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
And you, so you did the commute.
I did the commute.
Taking a train.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. It's impossible to find a place to park there, right? Or if you do, it's $600 a month for a parking pass.
When we relocated, I kind of drew a circle of all the towns that had parking for residents and that were less than an hour commute. And that's kind of how we did our search. So it wasn't bad. We did that for 5 years. And then we moved back to Arizona. And then 5 years later, we moved back to New Jersey again. And that time I lived in Jersey City. So I was closer to the city and it was a much easier commute because I didn't have the girls with me. They were both, off to college.
Right. Was that a total shock going to the East Coast?
No, I loved it.
Did
I
you?
miss it. There's a lot about it I miss, but it was fun.
For those that haven't been to New Jersey and been outside of that Newark, Elizabeth.
Oh, it's
that
much
area.
different.
Oh, it's gorgeous.
It's beautiful. It
It's
really
absolutely
is.
beautiful. Yeah. If anybody hasn't been there, Princeton,
Mm-hmm.
absolutely gorgeous town. So New Jersey is pretty cool. So let's go. Did you always want to be an accountant? You obviously had maybe had an internship and decided it was for you. Let's talk about the genesis of getting into this realm.
So honestly, from a very early age, I thought I would be an attorney. That was what my goal was, and that's what I wanted to do.
Where did that stem from?
I don't know. It was just very, very early.
Okay.
I,
Were you a good debater?
no, I wasn't a good debater. I wasn't a good arguer, but it just seemed like an interesting career. My father is a CPA and had his own firm. So honestly, growing up, we were always in the office, whether it was assembling tax returns before there was e-filing or, janitorial services. I grew up kind of in the business. But when I went to college, it was probably my first accounting class that I took that really just kind of clicked, which is, I don't know what it says about me, but it was fun. It came intuitive to me. And I thought, okay, this is what I'm going to do. Partly, I think, because so many people struggled with it. And it was one of those classes that was like the weeder class, weeded people out. You were either going to go on to be an accounting major or you weren't. And it really clicked for me and I enjoyed it.
So you hadn't declared anything. You were
Mm-mm.
just kind of taking all the classes that we
Yep.
have to take.
Yes.
And you liked accounting. I remember my accounting class. It was Accounting 101.
Mhm.
It was at University of Arizona. I don't remember how many hundreds of kids were in there.
Did you do the common exam?
I don't remember.
Where you used to, like, you went to your class and then the evening when we had exams, all 1,000 students that were in the different classes came to the auditorium and we all took the exam at the exact same time.
I think we took ours with the same class.
Oh,
Yeah.
that's how ours was. It was a little stressful, I will tell you.
Yeah, no kidding. That's a lot of people. But for whatever reason, I don't see accounting as hard at all. It made so much sense to me. I'm not good at math at all, but it made a lot of sense to me. Just, the different financial statements and how things go on, debits and credits.
Right.
To me,
It's kind of logical.
It was one of the easiest days I ever got because I didn't have to study that much for it. It just came intuitively to me, but it didn't click for me that that's what I wanted to do. I didn't know at all what I wanted to do at that point in time. So then it came time to declare, and you chose accounting over finance.
I did. My college education was a little different.
Mm-hmm.
I went to a junior college for 2 years and I played basketball. I was on a basketball scholarship.
I noticed how tall you were.
Yeah. And then shortly after that, I got married and I started my family. So I actually finished my accounting degree at night while I was working and while I was raising my family.
Wow. That's impressive.
And so part of it was I was working for my father's firm for about 3 years before I went into corporate America and started working there. And so as I was taking those classes, a lot of what I was taking was kind of supplementing what I was doing. And so I think that's also why I kind of stayed on that track and it just made sense to me.
Gotcha. Why did you not just stay with your father and go the CPA route?
Oh, so many reasons. Because I will tell you the first, honestly, is that I've never seen anybody work harder in my life. And when you own your own business, if you don't work, you don't get paid. And I remember thinking, I want paid holidays. I want benefits. I just thought that the corporate route would be better for me.
Gotcha. So you're working for your father.
Mm-hmm.
You're doing night school. You graduate.
Mm-hmm.
And were you still working for your father after that?
No.
Okay. So now you're about to get your real job, like your first corporate job.
Yeah.
How'd you find it?
So funny story. I had a brother-in-law who worked for American Express and they were always hiring and he just suggested that I go apply. And when I started with American Express, I actually started in their telephone service center. So I was not in accounting. I spent a year on the phone answering corporate card clients' questions, right, about their cards. And then the first opportunity I had, because you were required to stay in the job for a year, they had an accounting position open up. And so I applied for that. And that's how I got into finance at American Express, where I spent the majority of, all of my career there.
So you were okay taking this telephone job?
I was. I had a 2-year-old and a newborn. not quite newborn. And the best thing about that job and why it was so good at the time is that when I unplugged and left my desk, um, work went on and there wasn't anything waiting for me to finish up when I came in the next day. And so it was the type of job that you could really just leave and walk away from. And when you're in finance or when you're, in most jobs, you come back and you've got all of these things that you still need to do. And so, um, timing wise, that was perfect for me. But I will tell you, at about 6 months, I was bored and ready to do something different. So,
I'm sure.
yeah,
Yeah. Same thing in recruiting. There's just your day doesn't
doesn't end.
end. You have to end it.
Hmm.
And then you go home and I learned early on in a job like that I just had to shut it down. And I would wake up at 1:30 in the morning and I'd be thinking about what I need to do. And I'd say, I'm not going to solve any problems right now. And I just take it out of my mind. And that's the only way I could, for 27 years now,
Right.
owning my own business,
Right.
not making any money unless I'm working, workaholic, all of that. It's the same thing. I have to draw a line and shut it down. And I go home and I wouldn't even talk to my wife about anything that went on. How was your day? Great. Because it's just draw that line. She doesn't really want to hear about it anyways. So okay. So you get your first accounting job.
Yeah.
What was that like? A big company, American Express,
Yeah.
huge company.
It was really interesting and it was such a great opportunity. They had just started moving out some of their accounting functions from New York out to Phoenix, and we're opening up some accounting activity and back office activity in Arizona from a cost perspective, I'm sure. And I started out doing reconciliations, and it was fun. It really taught me how to kind of dig in, do research, solve problems. And, I kept raising my hand to take on more and, got lots of opportunities that just kind of stemmed from this, one little role that I took.
How do you raise your hand? What do you do?
As different projects were coming up, I would volunteer. I would make sure that, what I was doing was always done really well. And just as opportunities came up, I never hesitated to raise my hand and to take on more because I was always very eager to learn more. And so as, there were, new businesses coming in that they were bringing in, or changes in how we were doing things. And with American Express, one of the things that they always encouraged was to kind of look for opportunities to move laterally as well. And so I took a lot of those opportunities and didn't just look to move up the ladder, but to gain experience in other areas.
Mm-hmm. What was your favorite job in like first 10 years?
Oh, my favorite job was I had the opportunity to move back to New York the first time, and I was the director, assistant, and chief of staff for the CFO of American Express, Gary Crittenden, at the time.
Wow.
Yeah, that was one of those jobs that was just very transformational for me. It's the one that made me decide that I wanted to be a CFO, because I will say before then, I never really wanted to. I always thought I would be, stay at the VP level, do external reporting or management reporting. But that having exposure to the C-suite of American Express, having a seat at the table as they talked about the strategy, it really was a great developmental role.
What was it about that C level? Was it the strategy, or was it was it that attracted you to it?
Flying in the corporate jet? No.
That's a good
yeah.
one.
It was having exposure to all the senior leaders to see how they worked. I will tell you that Gary was an incredible leader, and just being able to mentor under him and then have that sponsorship, but just to learn how he interacted with people, to see the way that our senior leaders thought about things strategically, to kind of have a good understanding of the pulse and the way we were going as an organization. I mean, I got exposure to all of that.
Were you picked for that job, or
I
raise your hand?
was.
Or
I actually had somebody suggest that I would be a good fit for the role. It was somebody that had kind of mentored me and sponsored me throughout my career. I started working for him when I was an accounting clerk, honestly, my first finance role. And he's the one who encouraged me to interview for the job. And I did have to interview. There were a few of us. And yeah, I was fortunate enough to really get that opportunity.
why do you think you were picked?
I think that because I was willing to take the risk and relocate to New York, I think that said something. I think because of the track record that I had at American Express, I was consistently kind of stepping up and volunteering and doing, roles that, people didn't always think were the best roles. One other role that I had that I think was probably pivotal was we were in the process of creating a shared servicing finance shared service organization in Phoenix. We had one in Phoenix, one in the UK, and then one in India. And so I had the opportunity to work with the team as they developed that. And when I interviewed for that role, and went through the process, they said, okay, we're going to offer you the job. We don't know what it is yet. We don't know what you're going to be doing. You just need to get your passport. And that was all they told me. And I had, the opportunity to support our Latin America reconciliation bank relationship teams and actually relocate the work from Argentina, from Mexico, and Brazil into Phoenix and to build that team. And so it was taking those opportunities where there's a little bit of a risk, and then being able to be successful in those roles, I think is really what helped propel my career at American Express.
Did you have to interview with Crittenden before you took the job?
I did.
Yeah. What was that like?
It was scary. You always kind of felt like you were
had to fly
going
to New York?
I
and-
did. I
yeah.
flew to New York and I went through,
Had you been to New York at that point?
yes, I had gone a couple of times for work, and it just really was an area that I wanted to work in. And I think anytime anybody gets the opportunity to work in their company's headquarters, it's really a positive thing because you do get to have more of those collisions with people that are senior levels, and you get to be around them more than you would if you're working in remote locations. So that was one of the things that I was really excited about. I always wanted to, work in the city. It just seemed exciting, especially never having traveled much from Phoenix. So it was a big deal. I was the first one of my family to really kind of leave for work to another city and relocate. Um, it was exciting, yeah, but
How
it
the
was a little
kids feel
scary.
about that?
I moved when my daughters were in high school.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah,
Talk about the hardest time.
they must not have hated it too much because they're both still back there. But it was they were very supportive. At the time, I was looking for a role in New York and I was looking at a role in London. And I know that my youngest was very disappointed that we weren't going to London and we were going to New York instead. I wouldn't say it was easy for them, but they really handled it well. They assimilated very well. I didn't cause problems. They were good. They were supportive, and it was a good time for our family to become this little nucleus family again, or nuclear family again, just the four of us, because that's all we had.
Mm-hmm.
So
Wow.
it was a little selfish, I think, because I kind of got to get close with them again.
Yeah, that's good. So why you say you took on all these roles? They were a little bit of a risk.
Mm-hmm.
What, and you said the key thing that I want to key in on is you said you were successful in them. Why do you think you were successful?
Why was I successful? I think because I always was willing to dig into the details. with every role I went into. So as I started to take on more of those roles and even the leadership roles, it was important for me that as my team was learning, I was learning too, because I wanted to be able to understand kind of what some of the challenges were. It, as a leader, I guess I never felt it was my responsibility to be able to do their roles. My role was to kind of remove any obstacles that they had, but I had the ability, I think, to dig into the weeds, but not lose sight of the big picture. I could still pull back, which I think is important as you start to become a leader, is to be able to uh, have enough care and understanding of the process and how things work. And I'm also very process focused. Um, and then still be able to pull back and see the big picture and help set the strategy.
Yeah, being process oriented is good for an accountant,
Yeah,
right?
it is. It is.
Do you have your father's hard work ethic?
I do. I think he instilled that in all of us. Yeah. And I think that's part of it too. It's willing to do whatever it takes to get things done. And, there were some roles that I had where um, some of the deliverables were just heroic. And, I remember I, we had taken over our global, the operations, kind of finance operations for our global customer service. And we were trying to consolidate all of our metrics globally. And it was not an easy task. And we had a deliverable the next day. And we were literally there. I was there with my team, two of my team members, until 3:00 in the morning, trying to get this done. I remember the security guard coming in, scared us half to death. He was upset because we didn't tell him we were staying so late. We had no intention of staying that late, but it's that kind of work ethic, I think, that's important. And it's not all the time, but there are certain times and important times when you really do need to kind of go above and beyond.
Mm-hmm. Fascinating. So we talked, you talked about leadership. Tell me about your first leadership role. Was that early on? Does Amex encourage that
Yeah.
very early on?
Yeah, it was early on. And I think, I would say probably every 2 years, I would move kind of from an accounting clerk to an accountant to senior accountant, supervisor. So it was early on in my career when I started leading people. And it was interesting because the majority of the people that I was leading were older than I was, and had been my peers at one point in time. So it was difficult. It wasn't difficult. It wasn't just an easy fit. Like, I come in from the outside, you don't know who I am. They all knew who I was. They had worked with me before. And it was actually a really positive experience because the team I had was so supportive. And I think, you know, probably I was successful in that role because I wasn't trying to tell them what to do or how to do their jobs, because they all knew how to do it. It was more helping to bring the team together and raise issues and solve problems that they couldn't solve.
Did Amex provide any training for you?
Not initially, but Amex has some really great leadership and development programs. They had. I don't know if they still do. I'm sure they do, but they were always very supportive, and leadership was a key um, a key skill that they reviewed us on, and at all employees. And so it's something that's very important to them. And so they did do a great job in helping to nurture and develop their leaders.
So when you took that leadership role, I as well, when I took over the ownership of my firm, everybody was everybody except for my partner. He was younger than me, but the rest of the people, they were all much older than me,
Mm-hmm.
and they were all my peers. But I took over ownership because of just the same thing, just success and whatever. So, I had that same experience, and that was very challenging. Took me years to learn how to navigate that, because in my little firm there was no leadership development program.
Right.
It was figure it out.
Yeah.
And that's what I had to do.
So then now I'm at the point where everybody's younger than me. And that's,
Easier.
I don't know if it's easier. It just sure makes you look back.
It sure does. And it's different now, and you can really see the differences in generational, right? When they're all younger than you. But I found it, I could put myself back in their shoes
Yeah.
quite easily.
Mhm.
It sounds like it was a long time ago, 20 years ago, but in the grand scheme of things, it was just a blink of an eye. And so I have that ability to put myself back in their shoes and have more compassion
Yeah.
as a result of that.
Yeah. And do you develop your leaders now?
Yes. Well, thankfully, I joined an organization that has leadership development. So at the first opportunity, when I think they're ready, they go into the leadership, and it's ongoing. It doesn't just stop after one
Right.
year. They go to different levels and stuff like that. So, yeah, I don't know. I don't know if I'm good at developing leaders or not. I just let that program do it and then try to lead by example. That's one of my biggest things, is be out front and do what is asked, what you're asking.
Yes.
I don't believe in asking anybody to do something that I'm not willing to do myself.
Yes, absolutely. I think that's a really a great point, because they do watch, right? And I wouldn't expect my team, that situation that I told you about, to be there at 3 o'clock in the morning without me. It just, to me, you do have to lead from the front. You have to set the example. You have to help them see what's expected and really be clear on the expectations. I think that's important as well.
Mm-hmm. So what was the role? How long were you at Amex?
I was at American Express for 28 years.
28 years. That's impressive.
A long time.
That's impressive. So, what was the role that, besides, going to New York and working with the CFO, what was the role that set you up for the CFO the best, that, in your opinion?
It's interesting because when I think about my role as the CFO, it's somewhat of kind of a general manager to some extent, right? Because my responsibilities now are the controllership roles, which is the accounting, the AP, the receivables, financial planning and analysis, external reporting, management reporting, internal audit, payroll. And so I don't know that it was a role that set me up for success at American Express, but I literally had the opportunity to work across every discipline within the organization. So whether it was controllership, management reporting, I had the opportunity to work with our tax attorneys on legal entity structure and tax structures, did management reporting, external reporting. And so I worked across all the disciplines. And then I also worked across just about every business unit as well. So our international card, I did time with our operations. I supported our real estate portfolio on a global level. I worked with our business travel. And so taking the opportunity to kind of build my tool set across different disciplines as well as different lines of business gave me kind of a well-rounded experience to be able to move into a role where, as a CFO, you're looking across the entire company.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so let's go to. You got a VP title
Mm-hmm.
very early on, and you moved into several VP roles. At what point did you say, I might need to leave American Express to achieve my goals? Or walk us through that, because 28 years, there's very little loyalty in this world anymore, but there's several companies that I think of where people go and they don't leave.
Right.
The old Solomon Brothers City, when I was working with them early in the 2000s, there were people there that had been there for 25, 30 years.
Right.
And then, Freeport McMoran is a client of ours right now. They have people that have been working, that's like generational, like grandpa worked there, and then the son, and then the daughter, so the granddaughter. So, and American Express falls into that. I see
Right.
people that just work there for so long. So, talk to us about realizing, or what happened
Yeah.
when you're like, I may need to leave here.
So it was the second time, my second tour in New York, and I had been there about 5 years, or it's probably about 4 years when I decided that I think it's time for me to go. And partly it was because my husband and I were living in separate states. And as I started to look around at the different roles, I didn't see that there was the opportunity for me to move up, right? There weren't interesting roles to go into um, that really were enough to make me want to stay. And I thought, you know what, I think it's time for me to leave. I wanted to leave when it was a very, on a very high note, very positive. I loved the company. I loved the people that I worked with, but I was looking for another challenge, and I didn't see it available in New York where I was. And so I had talked to our deputy CFO at the time, and I said, "Okay, we need to figure out an exit plan for me." American Express was always restructuring, reorging, and I just said, I really would like to, when you guys go through this again, figure out, how I can, get on the list or get that exit plan. And he said, "Okay, let me think about it." And about a month later, he said, "Okay, I've got a plan. We're going to be creating a shared servicing organization around planning and forecasting, right? Tools, people, processes, and we wanted your help in leading that organization. And would you do the organizational design of that?" Of that transformation. So identifying, what roles would go into it, what people would go into it, and where they would go. So the people, the process, and then the tools that we would use. And I said, absolutely. And I had expected it to last. I think we started in May, and I expected it to last through the end of the year. And I ended up actually staying on an entire year more to help them through the transition. So we stood up the shared servicing and organization, and then we started to build out the tools. And honestly, I could not think of a better way to have left the organization, because I felt like there was this great success to leave on a very high note. The people I worked with were great, and it was just a really nice way to move on to something different. And then I started working in nonprofit.
Yeah, so let's talk about that. Make-A-Wish.
Yes.
You were the a VP and then the CFO, or tell me.
So it
that.
was a CFO,
It was
but
CFO.
it was a vice president. CFO was the title.
What a fantastic organization.
They are an incredible organization.
Yeah.
It was a great mission. I had always said that working at American Express, I felt very proud, right? Great customer service, great organization, but I felt very privileged to have the opportunity to work with Make-A-Wish, because it was just incredible people and an incredible mission.
How'd you find the job?
I had a former American Express colleague reach out to me.
It's amazing the network you build, right, from an organization like that.
Exactly.
There's Amex alumni everywhere.
Yes.
So did you take any time off, or did you go straight into that role?
I did take some time off. My oldest was expecting her second child. And so I took some time to spend with her on her maternity leave. And I took about 8 months off because she wasn't due until May. So I had about the first 5 months kind of trying to figure out what I wanted to do. And then she had the baby. I got to spend another, 8 weeks with her, and then started the role at Make-A-Wish.
Gotcha. Tell us about interviewing for your first CFO title. What was that like?
It was very interesting, because it really wasn't even an interview to start with. It was, why don't you come out and meet the CEO? and we went and had dinner together, right? We met.
Where are they headquartered?
They're
at?
headquartered here.
Okay, I didn't know
Yes,
that.
in Arizona. And so went out to dinner, just kind of chatted, got to know each other. And I do think at this level, it really is about relationships, right? You wouldn't be sitting down and having the conversation if you didn't have the skills or experience, I would think. And so it's more about the relationship and how well you connect. And so um, that's how that kind of started. And then I did go through a whole series of interviews with all of the leadership there, had to do a presentation. That was nerve-wracking. And yeah, and then eventually went to work for them.
And how was it when stepping in? Do you have your own office, the desk with the plaque and everything?
No plaque. It was interesting to me. It was because it's a smaller. The national office was a smaller, more close knit group. It really was just coming in and letting them get to know me and who I was and my leadership style. They have a group that was kind of shared servicing, so that was very familiar to me. The one area that I had never worked in at American Express, and which was a key learning for me, was treasury management, dealing with bank relations and managing cash flow. American Express, I never had to worry about that. So that was like one of the key tools that I was lacking, and it was a great opportunity for me to be able to come in and do that. But the team was wonderful. The people were very welcoming. It was, it was challenging. We were dealing with all of the chapters that were out nationwide because it was a federated model, and so building those relationships, I think, was critical, and that's really what I spent probably the first 6 months working on.
Gotcha. So, CFO of a publicly traded company, right? Now?
No, now we're not publicly
Oh, I
traded.
thought you were publicly traded.
No, Vitalant is a nonprofit as well.
Okay.
Yeah.
I knew that, but I guess no. Yeah, for some reason I thought they were publicly traded. So tell me, there's so many CFOs that I see that come up through public accounting, through investment banking.
Mm-hmm.
Do you feel that going through Amex gave you a similar type of experience or knowledge gain versus those other two routes? Because when somebody thinks, oh, I interviewed so many CFOs and they came up through that realm.
Mm-hmm.
You came up, and I haven't talked to anybody like yourself that spent 28 years with a world-class organization like Amex. Do you feel that prepared you in the same way that maybe public accounting or investment banking would have?
I think, and I can only speculate from a public accounting perspective, that you may get exposure to different businesses if you're doing auditing or things like that. I do feel like it gave me a great experience and a great set of tools to use for my current role. As I mentioned, having exposure to the different lines of business, having exposures in the different disciplines, right? Whether it's working with tax and our tax, or whether it's working with external reporting or management reporting, controllership type functions, having all of that experience. I don't know that you get that necessarily when you're working with a CPA firm or private equity. Private equity, I think, they probably do manage businesses, and probably all aspects of businesses. I'm not as familiar with that. I will tell you, having worked at Vitalant, though, I did get the opportunity to work on a dissolution we had a for-profit company that we spun off and sold. So I had a little bit of taste of that, which was new to me. So that was another learning that I had. And then we've also have a strategic investment fund in which we look at startups to kind of look to where we can strategically invest kind of as a minority partner in these startups that will, eventually help, enhance our business or patient care.
Gotcha. So what do you, if you're talking to somebody very early on in their career, and they want to achieve the highest levels, even if it is, VP at American Express is a huge title, right? So what kind of suggestions would you give to them?
I would say raise your hand. Look for opportunities to take on new projects. Don't be afraid to move into areas that are a little unknown. There were a couple of times I took jobs that had been created and they really weren't sure exactly what the full breadth of it was going to be. It had never existed before. And, being willing to take those risks, I think just really gives you the opportunity to shine and show, what you're capable of. So be willing to take those risks. Raise your hand for additional assignments. And then the other thing is look for opportunities to move into different disciplines. It's not always a straight trajectory up, and you will probably move ahead farther by moving laterally as well.
You just said something that just clicked with me. So before we went on air, I was telling you how I went into a program that didn't exist before.
Mhm.
And I didn't have any mentors. And I was very young. I had just graduated with my undergrad and I was in my graduate program. And I ended up quitting that program because it was new. I was the first person there. And I didn't have the courage to stay. And had I, it would have changed my career. It would have changed the trajectory of my life, honestly, because back then environmental sciences wasn't a thing.
Mhm.
And now it's everything, right? And you can make so much money in it and all this stuff. But I didn't take that risk. But putting myself back in that moment, I didn't have a clue what I was doing, and I didn't have the courage to stay with it. It takes courage, does it not?
Yes, it does. And it's scary sometimes. And sometimes you're floundering saying, I don't even know if what I'm doing is making a difference or is correct. But you just kind of keep forging ahead and you just kind of have to stay the course. But it is nice when you get to kind of develop your role a little bit. Scary.
Courage.
Yeah, it is courage.
Yeah, you got to fight that fear. Fear is one of the hardest things. I think fear is what prevents people from achieving a lot of their dreams.
Yes, I'd agree. You do have to take some risks.
Yeah. So knowing you, what would you go back and tell your younger self?
Wow. I would, there was a time in my career where I didn't have the voice that I do today or that I should have had then. And one of the things I would say is don't be afraid to speak up and speak out for yourself. And you're going to be okay. And just keep plugging away. It's, I wouldn't change anything that I did because it got me to where I am today. And not everything was an easy road, but I think it's just, continue to be persistent and don't expect perfection is what I would say to myself.
That's an interesting one. Because if you're a perfectionist, it's really hard,
It's
right?
hard, yeah.
Yeah. So I didn't think I was going to go here. It didn't cross my mind until I learned more about you. But there's so many women that want to have children and still want to have a career, right?
Mhm.
And you had an extremely successful career raising children. What do you attribute that success to?
I had an incredibly supportive partner.
Mhm.
My husband has been nothing but supportive throughout my career, willing to pick up and move back to New York. Um, I think a lot of it also is just I have two girls. And so my drive was always to make sure that they had an easier time than I did. Uh, and that was truly motivational for me. Um, yeah, I had a great network of support. My family was here for the majority of the time when my girls were little. When I first started traveling, my grandmother would come over and help. And so, I was fortunate enough to have that network that really made it a little easier.
Gotcha. So That's very impressive what you've done, by the way.
Thank you.
And the fact that when you said that we were going to move to New York, and they were supportive of you, says a lot about
Yeah.
you as a parent. So well
Yeah.
done on that. So let's say that somebody is interviewing for their first CFO job. What would you suggest to them to give them some advice of how to prepare for that?
I think it's important to understand the company that you're interviewing with, especially if you're interviewing for a CFO role. I think it's important that you do your research, that you learn as much about the people that you'll be interviewing with as possible, and enough about the company that you can have a good understanding. I also think you need to ask questions as to how they work, what their culture's like, because you want it to be a good fit. You don't want it to go into your first role and feel like it's not a good fit. And so that's important too, is understanding the leadership style that you'll be working with, because the at that level, it really is more about relationships than the ability to do the role. Um, so I think it is important to know who you're going to be working with, what the work style is, and that it's a good fit.
I think that's good advice for multiple levels too, though,
Yes.
especially, and so I prepare my candidates for interviews, and and I've broached on this before, but it's always good to go back to when you're interviewing, you have to show interest in the company that you're
Right.
interested in working there. And the number one way to do that is to do research.
Hmm.
Research the company, research the people that you're going to be talking to, try to find synergies,
Hmm.
things like that. And so that's extremely important. And then at that higher level, culture, obviously, and then just getting into the real nuts and bolts of the job,
Right.
which I've never been a CFO, so I can't talk about the nuts and bolts. And I wouldn't really know a control if it fell out of the sky and hit me on the head. But getting into that nuts and bolts of that stuff, that's very
Yeah.
important. And
When I had that period when I left American Express before I started working, and I started to put my resume out and started looking at different roles, or even as I've, kind of continued to just, see what's out there, the number of 990s or 8K filings, or the 10K filings that they have out there. I have file folders on each of the companies that I was interested in or that I was being recruited by, so that I had gone through their financials. I kind of understood, or had questions that I wanted to ask them about it. And I do think that research is a very important aspect when you're looking for your next role.
mhm. So did you ever contemplate retirement when you took those 8 months off? Like, oh, I could
No.
get into this.
No, it was crazy. It really was. As a matter of fact, when I moved back to Arizona the first time, I had just completed my MBA, which I had done at night while I was working full time.
Columbia, by the way,
Yes,
not just any
Columbia.
old
Yeah.
MBA.
Thank you. But I came back, and all of a sudden, both my girls were off to college. Um, and I was just working a regular, like, normal job, and didn't have all of this other stuff. So I went out and I looked, and I applied at the University of Phoenix and got a job teaching corporate finance for a couple of semesters, because I am not one to be able to sit idle, I guess, is my point. So did I ever contemplate retirement? No, I didn't. As a matter of fact, everybody kept telling me, you need to take time off. And I'm like, oh, I don't know that I can take time off. But then with my daughter having her baby, I thought, okay, this is the right thing to do.
Yeah, that's fantastic. So, did your daughters play basketball?
No, they did not.
They weren't into that, huh?
No, volleyball, softball, swimming, golf. They did just about every other sport.
Gotcha. Did you make a do you follow the women's
I have not.
NCAA tournament?
I do. I didn't do a bracket though, and my men's bracket got shot the first round
Yeah.
with University of Auburn going out.
There was only one perfect bracket for the women's NCAA for the Sweet 16. One
Really? Oh
in the
my gosh.
country. At least the ones that are kept electronically, but it's like trillions or something to get those right. Again, that's
Mm-hmm.
that math part that I'm not very good at. Do you feel that you have a passion for the business?
I have a passion for people, honestly, and I love um, creating a team and a team environment and a culture where people are happy and they want to come into work and they like being there and everybody works together. I think my passion is more around being able to work with and develop people, as opposed to filling out a tax return or doing monthly reporting. It's really the people that I get to work with that I have a passion, and I think that's why it's I'm not ready to retire, and I want to continue to learn and to grow with the organization, and see what I can do as far as building the next leaders.
When did you discover that your passion for people?
It was probably when I moved back when I moved back to Phoenix the first time. So I had moved out to New York in 2003. We moved back in 2008. And with the team that I had, it was it was just such a incredible team. They were great people to work with. And the work and the business partner were challenging at times, but the team we built was just so inspiring and so great to be with. And it was like I wanted to recreate that same team dynamic in every role I went into after that. And it was probably working with that team and those individuals that really solidified, my desire to be more in that leadership role and what my role is as a leader and where I could have the biggest impact versus supporting the business. I mean, yes, my role was to make sure that any obstacles that they had were taken out of the way and to manage the relationship with our business partners. But, after as many years as I had been with American Express, that's kind of the rote, it's the same. But it's building that team dynamic. I think that's when it really hit me because it was such an incredible team.
What do you do with somebody that doesn't really buy into that? Do you I mean, is it obvious?
Yeah. And you can have, one very unhappy person um, really try to bring the whole team down. And I'll be honest, it's what you have to what I found is you kind of lay out the expectations and what's acceptable and what's not acceptable. And, I've had to put people on counseling for, not having the right approach to teamwork or attitude. It's not just your work, it's how you show up and just being really clear on what's expected. And when you're able to kind of take that negativity out of the team, either by self selection or, um, you know, counseling them out, it lifts the whole team up. You don't realize how draining that can be on a team.
Well, if somebody's not pulling their weight and everybody else is
Yeah.
pulling their weight because they buy into the expectations, right?
Well, right. And they could absolutely be pulling their weight, but in adding so much negativity or toxicity to the team that it pulls everybody down.
Have you ever turned anybody around that was like that?
Yeah,
That must felt satisfying.
it is. It is truly satisfying when you can work through and set a vision about the culture that you want and, and get people on board and then see it really take hold. It really is satisfying. It's very rewarding.
Have you come into a division or a group or something like that that had a really bad culture and have to turn it around?
Yes, I have.
And what was that? Was that tough? Do you have do you have to
It took
change
it,
a
it
lot of personnel or
yeah, you do have to change some personnel.
Mhm.
And it's it takes a while. It takes a while because you have to get those that want to stay to buy in to what it is and how you want to work as an organization and the culture you want to inspire, and to give other people the opportunity to um, get on the bus and go forward or find a new route. And so it does take a little bit of time. It takes longer than I thought it would, but it is very satisfying when you can do that. And then to just see people that haven't had that positive environment thrive in it. It's exciting. It's rewarding.
Do you think culture is transferable from firm to firm? Like, can you have the identical culture at Amex that you can at a nonprofit?
I guess it all depends on the leader, because I do think it kind of starts from the top. And I think it's important for the leader to set what the norms are, how we work together, how we speak to each other, how we interact. So definitely a different culture at Amex than any of the other roles that I've had, but it doesn't mean that it's better or worse. It's different, but I definitely think that the focus on teamwork, collaboration, cooperation, having fun in the office, I have brought to all of my roles.
And they were adopted. Your team adopted that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. That's, I had never thought about that before, as far as transferring culture from company to company. But I know that change is obviously something that people don't like to do very much of. And
That's true.
And a change in culture can be one of the hardest things.
Yes. It can take years.
It can take years. Yeah. And, but that's such a great feeling to know that you've brought people around and then set them probably on a different trajectory for their career.
Mm-hmm.
So that passion is what keeps you going.
It is. It really is.
Do you have any other passions?
My family, we didn't talk a little bit about, what I do in my spare time. It is funny because we spend a lot of our spare time traveling back to see my girls and the grandkids. And I have a large family here and very passionate about that.
Well, that's good. So, do you go back there in the wintertime, or do you?
Yes, we go back because my granddaughter's birthday's in February. So
how old is she?
She just turned 8.
Oh, wow.
And so there's always a winter trip there. And then in the spring and the fall. And actually we go back probably every couple of months.
Gotcha. Well, if you can believe it, the time flew by.
Wow, it did.
And I appreciate you sharing your insights with the audience. And I know the audience does appreciate it as well. You gave us some amazing little short bits that we can take out of this and share with people that are coming up in their career. And if people want to reach out to you further and ask you additional questions, how do you suggest they get a hold of you?
I'm active on LinkedIn, and so they can reach out to me on LinkedIn.
Okay.
It's probably the easiest way.
Gotcha. And if anybody wants to get a hold of me and ask me any additional questions, I live on LinkedIn. It's probably the second or third app that I open every day, for better or worse. So I appreciate it. Thank you very much for sharing your time, and good luck to you.
Well, thank you. And thank you for the opportunity. This is, like I said, the first time I've done this, and it was fun. So
you did great.
Thanks. I appreciate it.
Thank you for joining us on this episode of Financial Footsteps, Candid Conversations with Financial Leaders. We encourage you to apply the knowledge and wisdom shared in these conversations to your own career. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to subscribe to our podcast and leave a review. Your feedback is important to us as we continue to bring you more candid conversations and thought-provoking insights from successful financial leaders.